Hey guys, I'm here with David Woodbury and Brent Rangen. How are you guys?
Doing good. Thanks for having us, Matt.
Thanks for accepting to do it. We had to reschedule a couple of times, but I'm happy that finally got the time to meet and talk a little bit about you guys.
Yeah, having a baby will throw a wrench into things a little bit. So
I've heard it does. I don't have any kids, but I've heard that it's even worse than people think.
Yeah, it's challenging. It is definitely challenging.
Brent, do you also have kids?
I do, two of them.
Oh wow! And David, this is your first one?
No, my third. Yeah.
Third.
So
A lot of kids.
Experienced.
big families here. Yeah.
So how do you manage the balance, the life-work balance, and you're entrepreneurs, so that's even more difficult.
Yeah. I've been an entrepreneur for a little over a decade, and lots of delegation and just setting boundaries and setting expectations. I think we both have wives that are very supportive of our careers, so that absolutely helps out.
What about you, Brent?
Oh, I realized I'm not very good at balancing it. So it's knowing where to get flowers at a pretty discounted rate helps. Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I try and do is I'm very kind of project management focused. Remembering to take the time to plan your real life at least as much as you would what's happening on a computer, for normal projects. So a lot of times it's just reminding, hey, sit down, it's time, family time, and being able to kind of switch that's a tricky thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like it's quite a challenge, even if you know how to balance it out. It's still always kind of a struggle. There was a piece of content. It was a training called Get Altitude by Evan Pagan that I went through years ago, and basically he was talking about this guy Tony Schwartz, who was studying with top athletes and basically trying to help them to manage their energy and capacity and become better athletes. And one of the things he was saying is there's the gray zone where you're not fully engaged, but you're not fully disconnected either. So you're kind of still doing light work, or you're not really taking a full break, no computer, no devices, just, nature, or, a meal, or just like totally disconnecting, real time off and rejuvenating. He was saying that basically you should either be fully engaged or not engaged at all and just like fully resting. Because if you're in the middle, and I tend to do this, and which is why probably I'm exhausted very often, is I still, even if I'm tired, I still keep working, and I'm not as effective, and I'm not fully engaged in what I'm doing. I'll watch, some TV shows on the background just to keep me entertained while I'm working for the long hours, and then, but what happens is you get more tired and you don't rejuvenate as much and you don't recuperate,
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to buy yourself a mountain bike.
I do. I actually want to do it. Yeah. Do you guys bike quite a bit?
We do, yeah. Yeah, we kind of live in I would say a mountain biking mecca here.
So where do you guys live?
We actually, so our main office is in Spearfish, South Dakota. We're about 45 minutes away from Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills. It's a pretty rural community, and so Spearfish is a small college town. It's about 15,000 total population. Brent actually lives in just outside of Miami in Fort Lauderdale. What his family does is they winter in Florida, and then they do their summers here in Spearfish. Brent married a gal from South Florida that wasn't a huge fan of our winters here. So,
well, to no surprise, I live up in Canada in Montreal, and it's cold as hell.
Yeah.
There's no point in living in Canada. It's it's a nice country, nice people. We're very we say sorry a lot, but a lot of igloos, a lot of fish, a lot of fishing, ice fishing. But
hockey, good hockey, good curling. Do you curl?
I don't personally. I dated a girl that did. All right, so I will tell people watching this a little bit about you guys. I have a couple of bios here to go through, but then I have a few questions I'm going to ask you. The purpose of this interview is really just to get to know you and for people also to want to get to know you more and maybe contact you if they have any needs and stuff. So we'll have some chances, hopefully, to do some other calls and something more focused. But so David Woodbury is a Chief Executive Officer at Rev7 and CampNative. You'll have a chance to talk about that. He's a serial entrepreneur with successful exit and attendee of 5 tech accelerators, a deep experience with economic and business development, and specialization in early stage go-to-market. He's passionate about bridging the technology gap in rural America and is a frequent speaker at Startup Weekend, Innovation Expo, and Enterprise Rising. Brent Rangen is Chief Operations Officer at Rev7. He's a digital marketing guru with experience in developing the search architecture for $3 billion startups, including the largest e-commerce exit in history. He's built 2 digital agencies from the ground up to over $5 million in annual billings. He is the primary contributor to Search Engine Watch and Search Engine for Dummies, and a frequent Pubcon speaker. So welcome both to the Business Growth Geniuses.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
That's solid. You guys have solid profiles, yeah. So how did you guys meet originally?
Actually, so when I was running CampNative, we hired Brent's agency to support our digital marketing go-to-market with Camp, and ended up just finding out that we were both from Minnesota originally, had a lot of common interests, and ended up bringing him up here to spearfish, getting him lost on a ski hill.
Very lost.
Showing him that there was a little bit more to life than just sitting in front of a computer screen, and then somehow convinced him to move from Miami to spearfish, and he came on board as the director of marketing for CampNative originally, and then we launched Rev7 I guess a few months back.
So Brent, do you regret your move from Florida to spearfish?
No, it's believe it or not, the drastic difference is pretty entertaining. So there's really never a dull moment. The commute time is much better too.
What would be the successes that you're the most proud of?
For me, I would say bringing CampNative to market. In 2 years, we have built the fastest growing reservation platform for outdoors properties in the world. And so that's definitely, from a professional standpoint, been one of the things that I'm most proud of. With Rev7, we've been able to do some pretty amazing things early on, just with we're, I would say, an ROI-focused digital marketing firm, and we've been able to really, we're working in some rural markets here with not a lot of access to technical talent, and so to be able to sort of solve technical issues for non-technical businesses has been it's been exciting to do that and see them be able to scale and have a significant ROI.
Great. What about you, Brent?
We spend a lot of time together, a lot of work overlap, if you can believe it. So his answer is pretty much, I think we've talked about it a lot. Being, just to, I guess, piggyback on what he's saying, to be in a major market within agencies and see kind of what businesses are getting for their money, and seeing the difference of that in rural areas is it's pretty significant. It is fun to see, and you tend to have a lot of different tone than you would in client meetings. When you're doing that versus you could, like Minneapolis or Denver or Miami, could throw a rock and hit an agency. Basically, it's, I'm sure, easier to buy a website there than it would be to find a hospital. So, not having that sort of competition is also nice too on the business side.
So, David, you mentioned that you're very ROI based. So, how does that translate in more concrete terms? How do you go about making sure that your clients have a good ROI? Plus, do you hold yourself accountable for that ROI?
Well, I think the clients will hold you accountable for it, by paying you the retainer. But I would say how we go about it is first of all, it's about picking and working with the right clients for your business and what your expertise is. For us, I would say are exceptional on e-commerce and reservation style businesses. So, we've been able to do some things like go into a traditional retail business, launch an e-commerce storefront for them, and do $7,000 in e-commerce sales in the first 48 hours of launching that store. Those are smaller wins, but for that small retail business, it's kind of a game changer. And when you look at how a lot of businesses in rural markets are sort of handling a lot more, I would say, traditional type of marketing. So there's a lot of print marketing, things that are very difficult to track the transaction value, the ROI on it. So really everything we do, we try to have some sort of tracking, and that really starts out with probably building what I would say is world-class Google Analytics environments for any client that we set up. And that's kind of a testament to Brent's background and his relationships in the industry with we just have access to the guy that built out Target.com's analytics environment, and we can put him on a small business, and it's a game changer to be able to track every interaction on that site.
Right, because if you're not tracking, you're navigating in the dark. You don't know what's going on. You can't really measure success, right?
Yeah, I think the goal is, with marketing, it's really fail as many times as fast as possible in the first couple of months and figure out what works, and then put fuel on the fire. That's it.
What have been some of your biggest failures in life or in business?
I don't know if I can share in life, but in business, for me, it's probably, my first business, I started a Verizon franchise, and I just grew too fast, and I put too much into reliance on another company. So, if you're going to start a franchise business, you've got to really look at those contracts and relationships, because if they change pricing, if they bring in a different relationship, you have a 100% reliance on the pass-through of that revenue model. I built 7 Verizon stores in Dallas, Texas, because we knew the iPhone was coming to Verizon back in 2011. And we got the iPhone contract, and it was like 10 cents on the dollar what we made with the other devices. So our entire business was focused on selling against the iPhone. Just, it was a damaging blow to that business. Really a more or less a 7-figure loss on that market. So that would be my biggest failure. I think just learning what a personal guarantee means on a lease. That's a tough lesson sometimes if it doesn't work out for you. Overextending and not having control of the actual financial component of how a business runs. I would never do that again.
Okay. What would you say was your biggest lesson from that failure?
For me, I decided I didn't like retail anymore. And so I basically reinvented my career after that experience to I knew nothing about software development. I knew very little about digital marketing, and this was 2011, 2012, and 5 years later, I'm running a pretty successful software company and digital marketing agency right now. Awesome. And it's just more scalable and more suitable for today's business environment.
Okay, Brent, would you like to share something as well?
Yeah, the thing that I guess would pop into my mind is one time I focused a lot of time on one specific thing, which was organic search, just basic SEO. And I probably spent a little bit too much time doing that. as PPC and paid social traffic became more viable as far as traffic channels, I would say. Not jumping on that sooner put me in a lot of weird spots.
Why did you found Rev7?
I think, so when I built CampNative, I actually built it out of Seattle, Washington, and then I moved it to a very rural market, Spearfish, South Dakota, and I really saw the technical gap in rural markets across the U.S. And our vision with Rev7 is to help solve that. And so we talk about supporting small business, but we're also we've got equity in several different companies right now that we're trying to bring to market, supporting other entrepreneurs. It's a very entrepreneurial, if you live in a rural market, they're much more entrepreneurial actually than major markets, because they're somewhat forced to be because they don't have the job markets. And but traditional retail, obviously you're constrained to the revenue that exists inside that market, which is many times very low. So using technical tools like e-commerce and SaaS-based businesses, reservation marketplaces, these types of businesses, you can build multi-billion-dollar companies out anywhere in the world right now. So it's exciting for us to be able to support entrepreneurs in these markets, and what I would, I guess, call underserved markets across the U.S.
And how does Rev7 stand out against your competitors? Do you have a lot of other companies that do something similar to you?
I would say there's really nobody that has focused. There's no sort of national agency that's focused on supporting rural markets. Everybody's vying over the Target, the Best Buy, those types of relationships. We're dealing with a lot of small entrepreneurs, and as a result, there's smaller budgets. It's a longer play for us to build a really successful business, but it's really gratifying work because we end up building sort of deep relationships with the business owners that we work with, and that can be a good and a bad thing sometimes. But it's valuable to be able to look somebody in the eye, and you're sitting down in that monthly meeting and know there's an ROI there. You're improving their life. You're improving their family's life, and their ability to employ and provide good income to the employees in that region. So there's not really, I wouldn't say there's a direct competitor to us. Obviously, there's almost every small town in the U.S. and probably in the world now has some sort of agency, but many of these agencies, they lack the technical talent. They lack the access to the resources that we have through Brent's 2 decades almost of being in the agency world. And so it's for us, it's figuring out a way to bring in A-level talent to small businesses at a price point that is extremely competitive. And so that's I think the biggest differentiator for us. I mean, we can compete head on with any major agency in the country, and our price point is half essentially. So.
All right. We do have a question from Carson Hetty. I'm just going to put it on the screen here. What has been the most rewarding project you guys have taken on, and why?
Hey, Carson, what's up, buddy? Carson actually ran one of my markets, ran my St. Louis market for our Verizon stores. But anyways, I would say the most rewarding so far has probably been one of our first clients, and that's just because we've had more time to really develop. Anytime you jump in on a digital marketing standpoint, we always set the preface with it's going to take a few months to to hit the ground running and start seeing some results. This particular client's been with us for a little over a year actually, and we've been able to save them over $50,000 on their annual ad budget. and increase their revenue by over $250,000. And this is a business that does about $2 million a year. So, if you start looking at the percentage, the metrics on that, it's an absolute game changer for that particular business owner.
Brent, would your answer go in the same direction, or maybe you had a different project?
It's the most enjoyable project or rewarding. I don't know. I mean, rewarding to me, I guess, makes sense as actual hours being better than your estimated hours for how much time it takes to do it. So I can think of a lot of projects where it's very rewarding that way.
What would be your best advice for businesses that want to grow?
Well, I mean, obviously, it really depends on your business model. Digital is, you just have such a larger audience that you can attract. I think one of the things that I think we think is really interesting is the ability to retarget people through social ads right now. It's kind of a game changer with the data that's readily available, and being able to sort of find the right niche, like find who wants to buy it, find the messaging that works, and deliver the ads in a way that convert. We've seen I think what average e-commerce conversion is somewhere around 3%, and through these models we've seen upwards of 8-9% conversion, which it's you figure out two things: cost of acquisition versus long-term value of a client, and you've got some gold there. So if you kind of figure that niche out, and then just put fuel on it, you're in a good place.
How do you recommend going about finding the right niche, but also finding the right messaging for that niche?
Yeah, I think a lot of people jump into that to begin with and fail to do a lot of the legwork first. Most of the time when you kind of have a conversation with the company in its infancy, it's a lot of looking at spreadsheet templates and things like that, forecasting financials and looking at viability of supporting the business, versus jumping in and just knocking out tactics. So for me, the plan, whether you do it quarterly or twice a year, kind of how to spend the time, whether it's just you or across teams. I think that's the most important thing. As far as effectiveness, digital, is very, very effective, but it's not always effective, and it's not always the most effective. So the failure to acknowledge those sort of things as well is really, I think, a disservice to the success of a business.
Okay, so Rev7 is a full stack digital agency. So what does that mean exactly? What do you guys offer as services?
I've been in more of you can't really call it a traditional agency, just because digital marketing is so new. It's not traditional at all, but just seeing how they operate, and then with David having the investment side as far as experience, going through the accelerators and having multiple other startups, it's been an interesting mix, just because it is very much like another agency as far as departments that exist, share content, social, email, dev, design. Pretty much what's normal out there. I think a lot of what's different though is, talking earlier about really pre-planning for success, and then the experience that he's been able to bring to the table on the production side of things is helping companies through investments and things like that, where normally be plugged in to execute a digital marketing project, and now you're actually having an impact on the course of this business. So digital can just simply be an asset at that time, where most clients, if they're going to hand you $25,000 for digital, that's you don't get to see too far into the business. You're just executing that project. So it is very much more relational, and it's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is I've spent a decade in the other chair, like the business owner's chair. And so being able to kind of, like, when Brent and I go into a meeting, he's got 2 decades of being in the agency chair. I've got a decade of being in the business owner's chair. And so you kind of marry those things together. And, full stack for us is digital design, software development, apps. We can basically do just about anything that a client needs across the entire, across the whole board, video, etc. But yeah, I think it's having that empathy, being able to sit in their chair and try to discover exactly what they want, understand, like try to get my head inside their head, try to get ourselves in their customers' shoes and figure out what's triggering sales, what's triggering conversion, etc.
I think that's going to make you stand out a lot against a lot of agencies that just execute the projects. They just have predefined strategies, tactics. They'll just focus on the tactics as opposed to really understanding the business and putting yourself in their shoes. So I think that's a really good advantage.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think there's 2 types of people that typically start agencies. There's sales guys that typically don't have very good production teams, or there's creatives, and they don't have good sales teams. And I think we've between Brent and I, we've kind of combined the 2 really well, offset the skill sets and in 2 different areas, really sort of polar opposite skill sets there.
All right, last question. What would you like the people and the members of the Business Growth Geniuses community to do? What's your call to action for people watching this?
There's a couple things we could do to support anybody out there. I suppose that if you want to do anything with e-commerce, Brent's built $3 billion built the search architecture for $3 billion e-commerce startups. And just on the small business side, we've had just lots of success with anything transactional. So reservation platforms, e-commerce, marketplaces, we really excel in those spaces. And then if you've got a startup that you're thinking about, I've raised millions of dollars in venture capital funding. I built out a angel and venture capital list with over 30,000 investors, email addresses, LinkedIn addresses, etc. And so I think we could be a valuable asset to somebody that's looking to try to raise funding and bring a concept to market.
Sounds good. Brent, anything to add to this?
Oh, no, that's it.
That's it.
I'm out of word quota for the day. Go back to the basement.
Thank you guys so much for doing this. I'm definitely grateful that you took the time to talk a little bit and share what you guys are about. I'm excited for you to have massive success, and hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Nice. Thanks, Matt. Hey, appreciate you having us.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Cheers.